We have started.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Welcome to today's AHAB meeting. Today is December 9th, 2024. We'll begin the meeting. And we'll start the meeting now. Thank you. Good morning. Ilya, will you need to read over the format and the hybrid meeting format?
Yeah, do that now.
Yes, please. Thanks.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Please silence your cell phones to minimize distractions during the meeting. When the chair calls for public comment, please approach to indicate you wish to speak. Please state your name before speaking. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes. A virtual participant should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Once your time is called, you will be unmuted and may turn on your video camera to provide your comments. The city reserves the right to turn videos off or mute participants. The primary format for accessing or participating in this meeting is in person at City Hall. Virtual access to view or participate in the meeting cannot be guaranteed. The chat function will not be monitored. If you have any trouble, the meeting can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Leah. For our first agenda motion, we are to approve the minutes.
And we need to do roll call.
We need to do roll call first. Look, it happens on Monday morning. I apologize. Let's do roll call. When I call your name, please say that you are present. We'll go down the list. First, Mark Bueller.
Here.
Donovan Dillon. Okay. Andrew Gallagher.
Present.
Marielle Fierro. Christine Gentry present. Elizabeth O'Neill.
Present.
Monty Soka.
Here.
And Leah Roslin. Thank you. All are present, with the exception of our newer board member. Moving on, our next agenda looks to approve the minutes. We will consider approval of meeting minutes of November 11th, 2024. Do I have a consideration or move to approve the minutes from our last
Sure.
meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Those minutes have been moved and approved. Can I get a going through the list of members here and get an approval from everyone? I'll go in the order that which we started. Mark Bueller.
Aye.
Andrew Gallagher.
Aye.
Marielle Fierro.
Aye.
Christine Gentry, I approve. Elizabeth O'Neill.
Aye.
Monty Soka.
Aye.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and minutes have been approved by the board. The next agenda item.
Madam Chair, do we have a new board member?
No, so we have, and we can take a couple of minutes to consider that kind of conversation. We have a board member who has resigned. Hai Sung Han has resigned from our board officially of last month. And so the city commission, as of Tuesday of this week, has approved a new member. And so we'd be welcoming on Donovan Dillon into our Affordable Housing Advisory Board when they are welcoming or ready to move into our space. So yes, we do have another person who will be moving into the space of our former board member.
Yeah, so somebody has been appointed, but they haven't received the official orientation yet. So I expect that they will be joining us at the next meeting.
We're really happy and excited to have another board member here. Moving on to agenda item B. We are to receive a tenant experiences report presentation by Christina Holt, the Assistant Director of KU Center for Community Health and Development. And we welcome that tenant experience report presentation today. Thank you. So we'll move on and hand it on over to you, Christina, and your team.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for having me and my colleague Faith Lopez, who is the prevention specialist at the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center here in Lawrence. And thank you all so much for the critically important work that you are doing for affordable housing in our community. So it's our pleasure to be here today. And the work that we're sharing with you today, we're sharing on behalf of Live Well Douglas County and the Sexual Violence Prevention Work Group and the many partners that are a part of that initiative, including Lawrence Tenants, the Willow, the City of Lawrence, Douglas County, the Lawrence Public Library, and a number of nonprofit organizations locally and concerned citizens. And we also would like to thank our funder, which is the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and who receives support from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for the primary prevention of sexual violence, addressing risk and protective factors for sexual violence, including things like housing. So, do you want me to address?
Yeah. And I'm happy to, if you'd like, but
No, I don't at all. Thank you, Leah. See, should I do slideshow here? There we go. Okay. So in terms of this work, it's been an ongoing effort for a number of years now. And the effort that you'll be hearing about today is one of the more recent efforts of the work group to really dive in and learn more and hear from community members that are affected by issues related to barriers to affordable and safe housing. And so in terms of the background of this effort, there was a community assessment that was conducted by this initiative. And of course, we also have a community health needs assessment. Both of those have raised housing as a critically important issue in our community. It's also a primary risk factor for experiencing sexual violence. And specifically severe housing cost burden, and that is much higher than the rate of Kansas overall. And we know that despite efforts to grow affordable housing here locally, that those who have had housing vouchers have still experienced barriers to accessing housing. Some landlords were refusing to rent to folks with housing vouchers. And so one of the efforts of the coalition was to support looking at what strategies other communities have done and kind of research what might be implemented here locally. So after a number of community conversations and some research and some conversations with our local city commission, in partnership with a number of local advocates, we were very happy that ultimately the city commission did vote to expand protections against discrimination on the basis of a person's source of income, immigration status, as well as add protections for survivors of sexual and domestic violence, human trafficking, and stalking. So after that, the group wanted to know what might we do to continue this work. And so the strategy was to engage in a survey of local folks to hear in their own words what challenges they were experiencing and what their suggestions were for strategies for improvement. Okay. So our hope is that by researching and learning from those who are most impacted, that we can become a county who can ensure affordable, safe, and housing that is affordable and safe and welcoming for all. So a few things, much of this, those in this room might be familiar with, but we know that nearly half of all homes in our county are renter occupied. And of those, approximately half are cost burdened, paying 1/3 or more of their income towards rent. And of those, we know that 35% are severely cost burdened, meaning that their rent is more than 50% of their income. Additionally, we know that the Housing Choice Voucher has a waiting list in our community of more than 320 people, which equates into about 1.5 or 2-year waiting list time. For the survey that was administered, we were seeking information on, residents' demographics, basics of their housing, experiences finding housing, the housing quality they had experienced, housing conditions and maintenance, housing accessibility, their current living situations, rental payment methods, their risk for displacement, rental application processes they had experienced, lease non-renewals and evictions, and ideas for improving housing conditions in Douglas County. The group was really intentional to partner with a number of other organizations and those with relationships in the community in order to really reach community members who may be experiencing housing instability to inform the efforts to improve housing for all in Douglas County. So you see here on the screen a number of the partners who were critically helpful in getting the surveys distributed. They were distributed both online via QR code and via hard copy in order to make the survey accessible. And partners in distribution of the survey included the Public Library, Lawrence Tenants, Independence Inc., Burt Nash, the Humane Society, East Heights Family Care, First Med, Justice Matters, ECM, the Children's Center, Ballard Center, Just Food, The Willow, Checkers, Dillon's on 23rd, the Lawrence Laundromat, Get It, Give It, Family Promise, and Black Lawrence. And we are very happy that 1,051 residents responded to the survey. Ultimately, the demographics of the survey were representative of the community, with the exception that Asians were slightly underrepresented. So I want to walk now through some highlights of the survey. That's okay. I do want to note that because participation in the survey was optional and participation in each question was optional, the N is not the same for every question. So just one thing to note. Related to housing availability and affordability, it took applicants an average of 3 months and 5 rental applications to secure a place to live in the community. In the survey, from those who responded, 67% of respondents reported rent increases, and that's in the past year. And of those, 22% reported an increase of $200 or more per month. Residents also reported difficulties posed by increasing rent and shared making very hard choices, such as whether to pay for food or pay for medication or pay for rent. Residents report a number of barriers to obtaining or renewing leases. The majority of those who had rental applications denied by a property manager or landlord, 57%, reported that the landlord did not provide any reason for that denial or non-renewal. Of those who did provide a reason, the primary barriers included credit and financial history, source of income, rental history, employment history, and criminal history. Additionally, many residents reported being negatively affected by excess fees, and nearly 40% of respondents reported having their security deposit withheld. Residents also reported lack of rental properties within their budget, as well as lack of rental properties that met their needs, such as not being accessible. A total of 86 respondents reported that they had received an eviction notice during their time as residents. And of those, the vast majority did not have any legal representation during the eviction process. Evictions did result in a loss of housing for 62% of those who were impacted by evictions. 20 respondents reported that they became homeless following their eviction. We know that, yes.
I think your slide deck is one slide to presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yep, there you go.
Appreciate it. Also, those of lower incomes we know are at higher risk of becoming served eviction notices. So nearly half of the participants who had been served eviction notices had an annual income of less than $21,400. Some residents shared that they live with constant anxiety about not being able to afford that month's rent. And of those surveyed, almost half of Douglas County renters have felt unsafe in their rental space. Nearly 2/3 of respondents reported that there had been times when they had submitted a maintenance request and it went unresolved. And 337 respondents reported that they had chosen not to submit a maintenance request at all for fear of retaliation. People in the lowest household income bracket were more than 4 times as likely to rate their quality of housing as very poor than those surveyed from the highest income range. They reported that housing often lacks regular inspections or code enforcement, and hazardous conditions include things like mold, foundation and plumbing issues, pest issues, and non-working appliances. One renter shared, "I haven't been afraid of retaliation from a maintenance request until recently. Last week, I asked my landlord to fix a clogged toilet, which they did fix after a few days, but afterwards they posted a letter on my door threatening not to renew my lease." Another person shared, "We don't want to cause any waves because when we do, then the landlord starts to get belligerent and he's saying he's not going to give us another lease. He could just up and say, 'You have to get out now.'" Another respondent reported, "You are stuck and they know it because you can't afford to move." "90 respondents reported that their landlord had verbally harassed them, called them names, threatened, or otherwise intimidated them. And the majority, 63%, had an annual household income less than $35,600. 12 respondents reported that their landlord or representatives of the landlord had physically harassed or assaulted them. One person said, "The way he was talking to us, kind of threatening, you know. My daughter was very scared. She's like, when is he going to kick us out? Do we have any rights?" 1 in 5 of those surveyed said their landlord or property manager had made them feel unsafe. And this percentage was highest in 66044. One resident shared, "I almost wanted to get a restraining order, but I'm thinking, how do you get a restraining order from your landlord?" "46% of survey respondents have felt unsafe in their rental, and there are disparities in feelings of safety between neighborhoods. Some residents express concern contacting the police for help." Almost 1/3 of respondents have a household member with a disability, and there is an intersection of related issues, as those who are most in need of accommodations are likely to have the lowest annual incomes. One resident shared, "As a person with a disability, this is one of the most frustrating things I realized while looking for rental housing. There's an inverse relationship between affordable and accessible housing." 36% of households who require accommodations or identify with having a disability rate the accessibility of their housing as very poor or poor. Tenants with physical disabilities report housing often lacks accessibility features or fails to meet ADA standards. One resident shared, "All the units have steps, either to get to the front door or inside. I cannot always walk or use the stairs, but this was one of very few properties I could afford." Residents also reported incidents of discrimination due to factors including ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender identification, disability, age, and parental status. One person shared, "If you are mentally ill or in need of a break, Lawrence is not for you." And these are a few additional quotes that we heard from residents in the surveys. Housing is not a luxury, it is a need. We had to move because we couldn't afford to eat. I have been traumatized by my experiences renting in Lawrence. Renters need support from the city. We have heard the voices of our residents. So what are we to do? Tenant protections passed in the form of laws and policies are critically important tools that we have for protecting tenants against rising rental costs, discriminatory and arbitrary eviction practices, and other threats to housing stability. Tenant protections can help level the playing field between landlords and tenants, rectifying longstanding power imbalances that impact the lowest income and most marginalized renters. We have heard loud and clear that we need more affordable housing in our community. One policy option would be a tenant opportunity to purchase ordinance, which is a law that gives tenants in multifamily buildings the right to purchase their building if the landlord intends to sell it. A tenant opportunity to purchase has been in effect in Washington, D.C. since 1980 and has helped preserve over 3,500 units of affordable housing. Several policy recommendations from A Place for Everyone, our plan to end homelessness in Lawrence and Douglas County, also speak to increasing affordable housing, including providing recommendations for city code updates that allow for affordable housing development and establishing an incentive program for affordable housing development. Additionally, we know that 19 out of 20 people who are served eviction notices have no legal representation during the eviction process. There are policy options for providing better support for tenants, and these include a tenant right to counsel ordinance that guarantees tenants that are facing eviction do have legal representation. Another policy option is a just cause eviction ordinance or a good cause ordinance, and this limits the reasons that a tenant can be evicted. Just cause or eviction ordinances are designed to prevent arbitrary, retaliatory, or discriminatory evictions. Another option are eviction record sealing and expungement policies. We know that tight screening standards can create numerous barriers for potential renters who have a history of eviction filings, criminal offenses, or credit challenges. These potential renters are frequently screened out of a large majority of available rental housing. Policymakers can address these high barriers through more inclusive screening protocols. Some states and cities have implemented laws that regulate tenant screening processes, such as fair chance laws that aim to reduce the degree to which a landlord can review an applicant's history of arrests and convictions. Passing an ordinance prohibiting junk fees is another policy option. These fees can show up in all stages of the rental process, including during the application process, during tenancy, and post-tenancy or during the eviction process. A 2022 survey of legal services and nonprofit attorneys conducted by National Consumer Law Center identified more than 27 types of fees that they had seen in the rental housing market. These fees, these can sometimes be more than the total monthly costs associated with a potential lease. So a junk fees prohibition ordinance encourages transparency and fairness in the rental market, including capping or eliminating unnecessary and often hidden rental fees. And lastly, it is critical to ensure enforcement of Lawrence's protection against source of income discrimination that is currently in place, which is also a recommendation of A Place for Everyone. Residents express the need for proactive rental inspections. public rental registries, and more legal protections for tenants. Rent stabilization and rent control, which are government enforced policies that limit how much landlords can charge for rent, can protect tenants from excessive rent increases. Unfortunately, Kansas state law does currently prohibit rent control. While there is a landlord tenants' rights and responsibilities ordinance meant to protect tenants from landlord exploitation and ensure rights, many tenants are not educated about their rights and do not know where to go when they face issues. Recommendations shared with a Place for Everyone community plan regarding improving inclusivity and equity and access to housing include establishing ongoing roles in this work for people with lived experience, focusing on equity in policy and budget decisions, developing a plan for ongoing community engagement regarding affordable housing, and developing programs that increase racial equity in affordable housing access and land ownership. When asked about hopes about what they would say in 2035, one focus group participant shared, "Lawrence is an all-inclusive community. There is no discrimination. You can find affordable housing that is safe. Your landlord treats you as a person." A beautiful vision. I think we would all agree. I think we have a little bit of time now for questions and answers. If anyone has any questions, we have also included our contact information here on the screen.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Christina, Holt and team. Are there any questions that this group has for the presenter?
It's not a question. This is Maria Ferrero. Thank you both for this. I had the wonderful opportunity of being a part of this work group for many years and part of this initial work. And this is a lot of hard work and a lot of community interaction that I think is necessary. We haven't had something like this before. And so this information and this data is so important to kind of shape the landscape of what we're looking at, and just a really clear reminder that our positionality as an affordable housing advisory board is not just to disseminate funds from a trust, but to really look holistically at the ways in which we can impact affordable housing and ensuring that one of our most impacted communities, tenants, have the things they need and are empowered to be able to access the affordable housing, because it would not matter how many affordable units we put in the community if they cannot in fact access those units and feel that they have access to their rights. I really appreciate the policy recommendations. I would encourage this particular group to look at these. Some of them I can speak on at a state level. There is the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network, which is a state advocacy network that is looking at a couple of these policy recommendations, specifically eviction, record sealing, and expungement is something they're looking at to implement on a statewide level. But of course, and then throughout this community in Douglas County, we have several work groups who are already diving into a lot of these policy recommendations. I think two on here that were something I wanted to highlight that may not be on this recommendation are looking at inspection processes. We do have rental registration requirements, and that has been a struggle. When I was in my position at the Housing Authority, we had our own inspection process that does not necessarily mirror the city's inspection process, which is okay. It was a little bit more intense. But
Yours was.
yes, yeah, but it met national inspection quality standards. And that was very much the positionality of HUD to make sure things were safe and accessible. And so I had always championed, let's see if we can start moving in that direction as a city, also taking into consideration the amount of work that is necessary for our code enforcement team to need to do. And then the other piece was accessibility requirements. I know we're championing and talking about championing more accessible units in our community, but also looking at rehabilitation of units and, supporting, if we're supporting landlords to be able to make their units more accessible. So we do not have this issue of affordability versus accessibility. So there's just my initial thoughts. I think this is something that we as a group should really think about and make recommendations where appropriately. I do have a question. Has City Commission had the opportunity to have this presentation yet? Okay, is there an intention to have commissioners look at this? Okay, okay, cool. Thank you.
Sorry, before we move on, I might suggest that it would be beneficial if the AHAB made an official recommendation to the commission to receive a presentation. Sometimes there's a thought that they can just watch the minutes of the AHAB meeting, so.
So we can make that recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let y'all talk and then we'll make a recommendation.
I just had a couple questions on the ordinance suggestions, policy suggestions. When you say junk fees, can you give me an example of what those look like when they're experienced?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, they can be literally throughout any part of the process. They can be during application, so they could be like a $250 application fee that someone experiences. They could be fees for background checks. They could be fees while someone is a tenant that they didn't realize they would experience. It could be extra fees for having pets, or it could be fees that they experience during like an eviction process, or when they move out, things that are withheld from their rent, from their deposit that they weren't aware were going to be. And a lot of times they're hidden and not disclosed during the initial process. I don't know if you have any additional examples to add.
Late fees are also a really big one that initially are typically in leases, but during the eviction process, those can be tacked on. There really isn't that much of a cap for application fees or late fees, and I think those are the ones that impact most tenants. Pet deposit fees are also big ones. And it's less about them being in, right, it's less about them having the fees and more about the exorbitant cost of fees. We've seen application fees especially be
It could even be payment fees as well, how you're paying, whether
Right,
it's
processing
digitally
fees.
or, yeah.
Payment fee.
payment processing fees.
We have to charge you for us to receive your money. It's nuts. I was also just a little curious on the Bill of Rights, tenant Bill of Rights. Are you saying that you recommend there be a like list of protections that they have, or are you saying that you're recommending that tenants are made aware of said protections that currently exist? I could be the naive one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so, and feel free, those who are more knowledgeable. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So tenant bill, it's both. So we don't have a technical Bill of Rights within the city.
Okay.
Kansas City does have a tenant Bill of Rights that they have recently passed, I think in the last couple of years, just listing some of this policy recommendation can be included in those Bill of Rights. It could be a right to education or to have a group that would provide the educations, like Lawrence Tenants, which is a group we just decided to grant some funding to. So it's a both and, I think.
Yeah, we did hear from a number of folks who said, like, if I have rights, I don't know what they are. And when I feel like possible rights I have are being violated, I don't know where to go. I don't know like what's safe. I feel like also if I try to go somewhere with concerns that my landlord's going to retaliate against me and I'll be evicted and I'll be on the street. So it's making people aware of what their rights are, perhaps making those more explicit. And then other communities sometimes have helped with education for tenants of where they can go for support.
It's probably just a novice follow-up question, but how challenging would it be to modify policy in town to require every lease to have like the final page be the list of protections that a tenant has.
Like when you buy a house, there's a
Not very hard.
disclosure of when. Yeah.
There was,
Yeah.
there was a recommendation, so just a little, I'm sorry, I have so much history. I was really involved in this, and so I have a lot of information. So when the source of income ordinance was brought about, there was a lot of additional pieces that were added into that that didn't make it through. It was pretty much just the Civil Rights Commission
I
now.
think it's still the human.
Human Relations
Yeah.
Commission was the one that added that to chapter 10, which is the non-discrimination ordinance. There was a piece called Article 13 that had some inclusive screening practices and also was discussing maybe putting some of the Tenant Landlord Act state statute within applications or within lease agreements. So they had that information. That did not go through commission, and I think it's because it's packaged with a bunch of other things that I
Sure.
think commission couldn't do, but I would think that that would be a relatively easy thing to get done. And something I think our commission would be pretty agreeable on, because it's just listing your rights, so.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, and I guess now would be a good time to just remind the board that in addition to making recommendations for the trust fund as a part of your role and duties, that it also this board makes policy recommendations to the city commission. And so if there are any of these policy recommendations listed or any other that are discussed that you all would like to explore more, we can add that to a future agenda item and have a more rigorous conversation. But that's absolutely within the purview of the AHAB. And yeah.
I think I know the answer to this, but are there any formal processes in place for the city to engage with and educate landlords regarding some of these things?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Presentation, that's it.
I can shut up.
Yeah.
If that's
Well,
just the two.
Given your former
Yeah.
role, I thought it might be
Yeah.
helpful to hear from you
No,
with that.
that's, if
Yeah.
that's helpful to you. So my position was to basically walk out this ordinance and provide landlord education. That was my position for 2-3 years. Working with both the city and county to ensure landlords had all the education they need, not only through the housing authority, but beyond that. When the source of income ordinance was introduced, there was about a 4 to 6 month period before the ordinance was actually put into place, where we had several listening sessions, communication sessions with landlords to educate them on this information, to listen to them, to help them. So that, and there is ongoing education for landlords at the housing authority. I think the city does a pretty excellent job.
Well, so I was gonna say, there's no formal place in the city. I mean, the housing authority did get a staff position to work with landlords, as Marielle is describing, but there's no like central office or a landlord liaison that's located in the city. Yeah.
And Marielle, is that position still funded at the housing department?
is.
That's great.
We have kind of an interesting dynamic. You probably know the numbers better than I do, but when we did a survey of landlords, we have, I don't know, call it half a dozen landlords that own a vast majority of the properties. And then we have 150 people that own 1 or 2 houses. And so there's some difficulty in getting to all of those people and the willingness of those people, because they have to participate voluntarily in those education things. You know, if you have 2 rentals, there's so many people that have 1 or 2 rentals in town, just aren't interested. They're just, it's just a fact the way it is. They don't think anything's wrong. So they just don't seem all that interested in learning. So I don't know, it'd be interesting to know of the respondents. You probably can't dig down this deep, but to know who they're renting from and what those responses, because if you have, I don't know, call it First Management that has, thousands and thousands of units. If they're an offender, that's a lot bigger problem than if somebody is because they're impacting hundreds and hundreds of residents. So I don't know, it's a complex problem for sure.
And I think anecdotally, we know that because of the calls that we receive repeatedly from the same, like
Mhm.
property management or
Yeah.
landlord.
Yeah, we also looked at eviction.
Oh,
Just
eviction
look at
notices, yeah.
eviction
because you
notices
can-
and who is filing
doing that,
those and
yeah.
kind of made that, but you're right, and I
It'd
think
be,
during that education, it was a lot of the smaller landlords. We did have property
Issues
managers from those
that they came.
companies come and get the
Right.
education, so I was very surprised and reassured at who was showing up, but there, we
that's good to
do
hear.
have a lot of folks, in addition to people owning a lot of properties, we have just as many who own one or two properties, and reaching out to them is sometimes a challenge, but
Right.
not impossible.
It'd be interesting if we could, I know the city can't afford to do an inspection on every unit every year or anything like that, but it'd be interesting if we had some way to enforce that on people that are repeat offenders, or there's an eviction, so we're gonna have a rental inspection on a turnover, or something like that to go, how do we get into more units more often on things that seem to be problematic or people we seem to see in the system or say. Because you're not gonna have, you can't inspect 50,000 units every year, or whatever that number is. It's a big number.
Mhm.
They could barely inspect what we have, with the once every 4 years or whatever the frequency is.
Does anybody here have any experience being a landlord?
I do,
And I do. I just wonder.
yeah.
Not yet.
Mhm.
Is that a goal?
Nice.
It
Not at this point.
might ought to be.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I kind of asked about landlord engagement and education, because while I'm sure there's a small subset of landlords that just don't care and
Right.
don't want to do different. I would like to think that there's also a large number of landlords who would be interested in doing different if they understood more of the context surrounding everything. And it's good to hear that the housing authority kind of have some processes, but so the city of Lawrence, has you apply for and get issued a rental license. And so it seems like there's an opportunity for the city to have more engagement, even just literally by email blasts education periodically to those landlords. And maybe they do that. I don't know. But we have a list of landlords. So
I guess currently as it stands, tenants do not have a lot of rights in Lawrence. And so I'm wondering what that education would entail.
we have a whole lot of education we just received about tenant experiences. Is there a plan for getting this out to landlords?
So I think I'll let Christina, but it sort of behind that question or my comment is, so yes, we can provide information and hope and rely on the goodness of people's hearts. Based on tenant experiences, it's clear that that's not enough to compel people because, right, and it's, if we had some sort of legal ordinance or regulations that required landlords to be
Not harassed.
Right.
Break in, jump through a window, whatever.
then I could see a more formal sort of education program. Right now, yeah, I'm sure the city, outlines basic rules and regulations, but the
Right.
problem is that a lot of these things that tenants experience, there are no protections for tenants.
And-
So,
And I agree. And I'm talking about like a both and approach. So it takes time to make policy changes and ordinance changes. And so if there are some low-hanging fruit opportunities to engage with landlords as we're going through some of these processes, they're just, maybe there's going to be two landlords that do something differently, even if it's something while we're engaging in these, policy change processes is why I was asking and inquiring if
And I think
there's.
there is I don't know how active they are anymore, but they're incredibly active during the source of income. There is a group of landlords called the Landlords of Lawrence, I think, that is a potential audience. I think that dissemination of this information is incredibly important, and there is that opportunity to provide that education. I will also say in that experience of source of income, the immediate thing that happened after that passed was a lawsuit against the city for source of income. So there is a very definite power imbalance, and then there is a perceived, in my opinion, a perceived threat from landlords when you attempt to move them in the direction of a more balanced playing field. And so I think that maybe the conversation is how can we start shifting that power imbalance towards more tenants? And I think at the same time, this information deserves to be disseminated, and that could be a potential group. But yeah, I think if we can make the policy recommendations and try to balance this kind of very more and more tipping scale, then that plays more into equity, because you can educate people all day. They're going to make those decisions. And unfortunately, the source of income ordinance really showed me, and even having those education moments, I cannot tell you how intense those moments were, where,
Sure.
a lot of personal aggression was put towards the people trying, and the city did provide that education. And so I think on experiential level, that was very, very difficult because the power dynamics are so incredibly skewed right now. But I agree. I think if we can disseminate information and support a group that is doing that, there are options if that group would be willing to receive it. But I am with Leah in that if we can, whether it's this group or however this is moving forward, really focus on policy recommendations that will start shifting that conversation.
So in the event someone doesn't pay their rent, is eviction appropriate?
So I am not a policy expert, and what we've done is researched what other communities have done in terms of policy protections for those who are facing housing barriers or those who are renting. So I think we could look at what are model ways to respond to that. I'm not sure how to answer that off the top
So
of
if
my
I
head.
rent something from you and don't pay you, don't you think you have the right to ask me to go find somewhere else to live?
I mean, I think eventually that is something that would happen, but I don't think my personal opinion, and I'm not speaking here on behalf of anyone, my personal opinion is being 3 days late on rent or 5 days late on rent does not necessitate an eviction notice, no.
I agree with you.
Is that happening?
Yes.
3-day notices are very common
Ooh,
and
man.
not legal in many states, but are legal in the state of Kansas to provide an eviction notice after 3 days.
I'd have been kicked out of my place. That sucks. 3 days?
Yes. And you're accumulating a lot of fees during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, talking about the power, realigning the power imbalances, listening to the experiences of the tenants, talk about safety and quality, I can understand the submittal of a maintenance request being something as if you honestly did something wrong to that appliance, or, it's the expectation of holding some kind of, I'm holding your space and I'm doing a really good job in it. However, there are things that needs to be fixed in maintenance. And then what I'm hearing and reading is that people are afraid to let that be the instance where I need you to help me fix something. And that submittal of maintenance request becomes now a opportunity for you to judge, and then becoming more of a snowball of me not being a great caregiver to your estate and property while I'm doing the normal activities of washing clothes, doing things and things break down. I'm curious about the power imbalances that align with those who want to be a part of the discussion of submitting those requests in a way that is conducive to the optimal health of that unit. So I'm going to use an example of how some folks I know that were not wanting to be a part of HUD or accept tenants with a housing choice voucher and go through all that process of being on the housing voucher with housing authority was that maintenance requests and submittals and making their unit to be as a qualifier. That was their concern. We don't know if we'd even pass the safety inspection for my home. But oftentimes I think that might be the education piece to say, if HUD's in here, or if someone has a quality inspection report comes in here, it's really going to benefit both the homeowner and the person who is living in the space and eliminate some of those things that are really yucky in there. About how there's a power imbalance by some way. And we know that there's a bias that exists in someone holding a voucher or even getting some kind of allowances which says that we can't afford to live here anyway. We're getting assistance to live here. So in some way, we're not capable of handling all of these things that we need to sustain a household. But yeah, that right there, I think is a real good education piece that kind of mixes in with like, there's a purpose and a structure that's going to help be a balance of power where people do not feel threatened to ask for help in a unit that they are living in because they aren't able to fix what they've broken or fix what they have used. I feel about that. What touched me was folks who were feeling for safety of their lives by having a person who has a key to their apartment or their home being able to have access to it at any point. I don't know. I'm thinking about, how do we meet that? How do we restore some of these broken relationships that could look to be what we could provide as here's a way for you to check off all of the things that you need. And then someone else also accounting for that, where that person doesn't have to feel at a position of, I've done something wrong. Here, help me fix something that I've broken. And that's the relationship that I think doesn't happen in a large scale first management. It does happen in those I own a small property, I own 3 or 4 properties. And if we get more homeowners, landlords who have those personal invested interests in wanting to repair relationships, I think that's the education piece that we can capitalize upon. Maybe those little policies that we can put in place would help landlords who are good citizens and servants eliminate some of the disparities that comes with just feeling safe in a place that you don't own yet, but you're renting from a person who is discouraged by you maybe utilizing and abusing their appliances. I don't know. I feel for that. Those points really struck out to me, being in your home and not feeling safe. So thank you for the presentation. Are there any additional questions or comments?
I might just add that the full report is available online if anyone is interested.
Would I be able to make a recommendation? Is that appropriate? Okay, I would like to make a recommendation that we as a body recommend this presentation be heard by our city commission.
Second. That's a motion.
That is a motion?
I believe it is. We have a motion on the floor. Now, do we need to kind of write out a formal motion and then submit that?
Just as it was stated, will work just fine. So,
You'd like them to present to the city commission.
Yeah.
It may be a study session, it may be at their general meeting, but
Whatever they choose.
Okay, so we have a recommendation. I'll go
In a
through-
second.
In a second, yeah. Do we need to go through each member? Okay.
if you want, or you can just do
we're all supportive of
Yeah.
this.
Okay, all those in favor of this policy or this recommendation to move to present this opportunity to our city commission? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries and the recommendation carries. Thank you,
I
Madam.
have one other comment. If one of the things I noted was the increase in rent. And it looked like if it was $100 on $1,000 unit, that's 10%. Just kind of rough numbers. I'd be curious how that relates to the increase in the property tax. Because if a landlord got, like I did, a 20% increase in my property tax, I probably passed that, they might have passed that through. So
Insurance.
and insurance or whatever, but I mean, the city and county may be in itself creating an affordability
Issue.
issue. I mean, that is money out of, it's a cost to own the building and it's going to get passed through. So I'd be curious to know it'd be interesting to know how that relates, you know, if we saw an average of 20% property increases, that translates into an increase in rents.
Yeah.
Because the way it's written, the way it was presented is it makes it sound like landlords took another just 20%
Great.
increase and
I don't recall doing
Yeah.
that, but, and the full report's not gonna get down to
that level.
this person, that lady, that man, that situation. We're not gonna
Right.
learn that. So we don't know if, 3-day evictions is bullshit. It just is. But not paying your rent is a struggle too.
Right, sure.
Yeah, and most landlords would, it's my experience, is most landlords are gonna work with somebody on a payment plan to figure out how to get them back in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do.
Rather keep the house.
It hurts me, it hurts a landlord in
Changing
terms of
tenants.
the building. It's
Changing
it's
tenants.
always a loss when you flip a building,
No
so.
fun.
There's a lot to discuss
There's a
in this
lot.
report and
Yeah.
I wonder if the AHAB might want to have a study session or some other opportunity to discuss it at length, since we do have another presentation that we also want to provide equitable time for.
Yeah, thank you, Leah, for moving us. forward.
Yeah, but
It sounds like a really great conversation. to
Yeah, so-
During a work session.
Okay.
Cost.
And our information is on the slideshow as well. So if there is an area or an organization that you would feel benefit from this presentation, we are happy to provide that. So.
Landlords haven't been presented this, have they?
No, we did offer a public session at the Lawrence Public Library and some landlords came, but yeah, not specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
all
you
so
so
much
much
for your
for
work in the
you.
presentation. Appreciate you.
Thank you all for the presentation and discussion topics. It seems like this is a great time to continue talking more and deeply about this subject. Moving us on to our agenda item number 2, we're to receive a presentation from on community land trust by Rebecca Buford, the Executive Director of Tenants to Homeowners. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. And I brought my home buyer program manager, Ashley Taylor, who works with all of our homeowners and she was doing real estate on the crazy market for 7 years with the highest selling team in town. So she really went from that to nonprofit. So she has a really great sense of, the struggles against the market, which you guys had a great session already making us think about that. I did want to say, well, let's just jump in. So I'm executive director. Ashley runs the home buyer program and is my assistant director. So she knows all the secrets of something. But I have been there for 23 years. So we really started as a tiny little organization doing home buyer stuff. That was our bread and butter, kind of little programs with the city. And now we have 116 homes in trust that we steward over time for entry-level homeownership. And we also manage 136 rentals. So that has grown significantly in the last 5 years and speaks to the discussion you were just having, right? Of how much we need people that make payment plans, people that provide supportive services. So I will say most of my rentals, and the reason I'm talking about rentals a little bit, I want to talk about the land trust, but I also, because of that great discussion you've had, and also because the trust fund money that we have gotten over the last 6 years has mostly gone into affordable rental for the hardest to house. So I think that's a good, remember, we kind of have this spectrum, and I want you guys to think about the whole spectrum. So yeah, we were kind of like a mentoring program with one staff member, and they would get volunteers, older individuals who bought their home, to teach young families how to buy a home. Because there's a lot to learn in it, isn't there? Who's gone through the process and was like, I was not given this information in high school. Yeah. Like, whoa, wait a minute. I missed that class. So we really like to focus on education with our first time buyers. And then beyond that, just how do I do this? Then how do you do it when you don't have unlimited resources in Lawrence, right? That's really the rub. But we've partnered with the city for years. They're one of our best partners, and done some projects with them, including way back in 96, Atherton Court was after that, but where they actually, one of the first development projects that the city supported. So the trust fund money, there's been some big projects before that created permanently affordable housing. Or I should say that created affordable housing, not permanent yet, which is a big reason why we went to the trust. So the Hoot financing program would give people 20% down, kind of give them a little money to buy a house that was more than what they could finance. But then those sold on the market and were gone, right? When they were ready to resell. So all that money that was put into 278 families getting in their first home is no longer affordable. Unless some of them, we haven't kept track. I think there's 2 or 3 left in the Hoot files, right, Brad? Not, no, 5 or 6. 5 or 6, okay, 5 or 6, but they'll sell for market value way above and take most of it and owe us like $10,000. So that doesn't get us another home, right?
Have an outstanding mortgage on those 5 or 6 for anywhere from 10 to 15.
10 to 15,000. God knows our subsidy need now between what working class can afford and what a new construction costs is about 100,000.
But you do get that back, right?
We will get that back. So that will go to, maybe one project for all 5 of them they sell. But yeah, there was, and we always got something back, but we realized we weren't getting enough back with market appreciation. So we're still kind of digging a hole. And so that's why we started in 2005 saying any money we're going to put in to home ownership is going to be locked in. And that doesn't mean that they can't live and die in the house and heir it to their children, but they can't take it all with them, which is just a way of saying, we're going to save you several $100s a month while you need it. But if you're ready to move on and buy a new house, you're going to do that for the next buyer in trust. So I really think from your position, from our position as policymakers and understanding this, it's really, really effective use of federal money, right? Doesn't go away after one resale. Actually, we're at 116, aren't we?
We're at 114.
We're at 114.
You're thinking 116 because we've got 2 on Michigan that are going to be coming.
Thank you.
So
God, as I get older, I should just not say numbers anymore. We're proud of over 100. So again, these things are not going to need any more money when they come up for resale. And there's 114 of them out there that families still tend to move in 5 to 7 years, just like everybody else. So these will roll into continue to serve other people. Most of them are single family. Now, a lot of places elsewhere are like, well, that's really wasteful. Why do you do that, Rebecca? Well, that's because that's the only thing allowed by our development code. We're hoping the new development code will allow me to do some other types of building that is generally more affordable than single family on a big lot, right? But historically, that's been what we've been able to do. So there are some condo units where there's no ground lease. But most of the single family, we own the land, but we lease it to the family for 99 years. So they have every right as any homeowner. There really is nothing we take away from them except the restricted resale price. And since we gave them part of that initially, that's kind of saying you can use it as long as you need it. Again, can go to your second generation. But if you no longer need it, we want it to go to someone who needs that entry level step in. So to give you an example of how well this has worked, of course, we put our first house in 2005 and prices were very different then, but just to give you averages, and of course my prices now are definitely the highest, but of the 114, the average price, if we look at everything from 2005 to now, and we put 11 new homes in trust in 2024. So we actually put a lot in this
that
year.
was Michigan and Harper?
Beatnik and Harper.
Beatnik and Harper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's been our biggest year since the pandemic, for sure. Part of that is construction, everyone's back. to do stuff. So, but that gives you a sense, 118, and the average price, I always look at the Lawrence Board of Realtors statistics to be correct. And so year to date up to, I think October, average sales price was 346,295. So that gives you an idea of most of the families, 46% of Lawrence households make under $50,000. We just have this giant gap of between what families make and what houses cost. And that's why we're also seeing a lot of people moving in from California and from Kansas City and Topeka, right? We're becoming more of a bedroom community because our local economy is not providing enough money for people to buy houses at that level. And we're not talking about, oh, those people, this 10%. Remember, that's why I love that statistic. 46% of Lawrence households are eligible for my program. So when we talk about those people, we're really talking about most of my homeowners are teachers, social workers, college educated. Almost all of my homeowners in Lawrence are college educated. So we have a real gap. No, I'm not saying anything bad about, we should house everybody too, right? But I think there is this perception of a certain, paycheck to paycheck, can't pay their rent, which we need housing for too. But my homeowners are not. Those are like our teachers and social workers who make $40,000 to $80,000 a year. They just can't afford $350,000. So we're really putting it in their price range. Right now, my brand new construction is $165,000, $175,000. So it's not cheap. That's the other thing when the neighbors are out saying, don't build in my neighborhood. I'm like, they have to get a $1,400 mortgage payment. What are you? I don't understand what they think is happening.
Is that your final construction cost or is that the sale cost of your house?
That's the sale cost.
Sale cost.
Oh, final construction cost is $100,000 more than that. Yeah. So we're right.
Okay.
So we're subsidizing by 80 to 100,000 to get down to that price.
Right.
But I mean, people are, Ashley, you want to speak to that a little bit? We had a waiting list of 40 families when she kind of came on, and that's right before interest rates doubled.
Yeah, so that waiting list that I've had, that buyer pool, when those interest rates started going up, it dropped a good, 10 to 12 people
Right.
out of the ability to even purchase. I kept them in my buyer pool, obviously, and I check in with them. But, as the cost of construction go up and our interest rates around that 7% mark, the truth is that 160, 165 is no longer affordable. Right? Because affordable should be 30% of their income. Thankfully, our lenders will consider a higher debt load. They consider a 38% debt load because we build so energy efficient. They know that our homeowners are going to be saving money on the utilities that can go back into their mortgage. But, that flexibility is what allows people to get in, but still not actually that 30% rate because construction and land is very expensive.
So historically, we've been, those 114, a lot of those families really were able to get in wonderfully because we had this, at the 4% that may not be able to repeat that if it was going on today. So unfortunately, that means we're serving a little higher income. Now there was some discussion about at 110%, but we serve under 80% AMI. So no one that makes more than 80% can use our program. Now, if they win the lottery the day after they buy, they can stay in the house, but they can't rent it out. So again, everyone tends to return it to the program if they no longer need it, especially like say their heir lives in New York City. They can't rent it out from New York City. So that forces them to resell.
Then on your program. Nice.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing when we talk to neighbors and they're worried about affordable housing, and that really actually brings them a long way to be. I said, you can't know that someone won't have college renters next door to you. You can't prevent that in anything, right? But our homes, they will always be owner occupied.
Question for you.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned that when someone purchases a home through your program, there is a resale restriction.
Uh-huh.
How does that work exactly?
I'm gonna get to that, and that is the perfect.
Give us your formula.
Yes.
Yeah, to know your resale.
And so, yeah, and there have been 59 successful resales. So somewhat getting to your good question too, does it work for people to move on? 85% have used their equity to move to the unrestricted market or a different market. So, but let me show you the formula. Well, community land trust. I know, Leah, we want to talk about how could we imagine this expanding. So I did want to give, is a community organization that does stewards, affordable housing, develops often, but also can do community gardens, civic buildings, commercial spaces, and other community assets. So I know the city has been looking at, can we use the land trust, the community land trust? And we really need to think, okay, that's something that my organization can steward, and we don't get it. It's not ours. It's in the membership-led community land trust, which is a nonprofit board. Our board is a membership board, and a third of our members have to be the people we serve. So when we talk about voices, I really want to say our board is, most nonprofits, rightly so, have folks with resources to bring resources to their work. We do not. Sometimes I wish we had.
They have resources, just not financial resources.
Yeah.
Bringing different
Thank you.
resources to the.
They're amazing resources, just not the cash kind. So yes, they're incredible resources. Their voice is what do people need on the ground. And so I'm really proud of that and want to be really clear about that, because I think sometimes we think, well, that board hasn't experienced houselessness. Most of my board, a third of my board members are homeowners in the trust. So they're using the program.
Do you have a tenant on your board?
We have in the past, we do not right now, but we're looking to recruit that because I think that's a really good voice to have. So again, the community land trust is just balancing the need of individuals to buy a home, make some equity, build some wealth, and the community's need to meet the majority needs, to have those permanent stock of homes in trust that are affordable and entry level. Because 59 resales and we have 114, so we've served almost 200 people, getting in, and then many of them, 85% of that 60, moving on and not needing subsidy anymore, which is my favorite statistic, really. Like if we can get people in and then they can build some wealth and no longer need assistance, how cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
So in exchange, remember their sales price is restricted, but they got a sales price initially of 50 to 100,000 less than the market value of the house. So they have title to the improvements. I cannot walk in their house. That is their house, okay? They have title and improvements, but we own title to the land, so the title is split. And then we give them a 99-year ground lease to use the land, just like any other homeowner. So again, this is not a short-term lease. This is a long-term lease. It has to be over 30 years or the lender wouldn't touch it, right? It needs to be through the mortgage period. So then we do a new lease every new buyer. So they then have a whole 99 years for their, so when we say you can heir it to your children if they need it, you absolutely can. Most of us are like, in 99 years, I'm not going to be around. So, but I do care. It should work.
Lenders can mortgage it.
And lenders can absolutely mortgage it. So yeah, they have to get a loan from the lender, which is great to have that partnership, but also that responsibility as a homeowner, right? We don't subsidize horrible credit. We subsidize low income.
And so do they just get a loan just from commercial bank lenders? Like, do they just?
Two lenders that we work with.
Okay.
This is a little weird for the lenders in the world. Now, it happens across the country, but so, and you guys know, again, this was just who are we really housing? And it's really professionals in this community that choose, jobs that don't make 150,000. And God love them all. Because they're the hard jobs. Really, Ashley and I were like, oh, you're a social worker. Thank you. You called the right place. Yeah, so I am a little biased. Sometimes I like to put my social workers in and my teachers. But this does give you a sense of these are the maximum income guidelines. So again, this is not poverty level. This is working class housing. And like I said, 46% of Lawrence households meet this. So let's look at our formula because you just went to that in a good way. So let's do an example. To me, it's always example is the best. We build a house that's worth 200,000. I'm going to use round numbers for this. They're not very realistic, but 200,000, and we sell it to them for 150. So good deal. 50,000 in, less in a mortgage. What does that save them in their monthly payment? Anyone do?
$500. I mean, it's basically $100 for every 10,000.
Yep, thank you, Monty. I knew some nerd would know that. Oh, Monty.
Depends on the interest rates.
Nerd would know that for
I was like, really that loving.
Well, it's all good.
It's like Monty will know the crazy formula. Okay, so yeah, that's probably a better way to think about it, is that we're giving them $500 back a month when living in. Because I think sometimes when people say, oh, they're restricted, why would you do that to people that are lower income? And there is a criticism about that. But I would say none of the people we sell to have another option. So this is really, okay, to get in and build wealth so then you can move on and have other options and retain all the wealth in your second sale. And most of us do that anyway, right? We don't buy our dream home first. We build up to it.
What's the criticism?
There's a restricted resale for lower income people. But yeah, I'm saying I don't really agree with it because it's the only way
It's not a grant, it's a loan.
It really is.
It's kind of
like they can use it. It's a pay it forward, right? They can use it until they no longer need it. And we're not taking it away from them after 10 years. They can have that subsidy and live and die in the house and inherit to their children, right? We're just saying if they are able to make more money, and it's usually what families do, like you move in single teacher, if you marry someone, you double your income, something like, the way life changes for most of us, right?
But only if they choose to sell, right? So they can
Right.
have a income change.
No.
It's totally up to them.
Exactly.
They can live forever in this.
They can,
We own the home, they just don't own the land.
right. And that's the nice thing is that, unless they choose to move, they have the right to that and they can win the lottery. The reality is most people that have come into an inheritance or something move on. Yeah.
So the other 75% of the overall appreciation, is that something that the sales price is the sales price, right? So if you go 200, you bought it for 150 and then
Let's say it appreciates by 100. I'm sorry.
Right, so then now you're selling it at 175, but it was technically worth, what would that be? 350 after the 250 initial valuation plus the 100. So they're selling it at 175. Do you
for
guys?
a 350. No one liquidates that. It just is locked into the home.
So are you guys involved in how are you involved in the resale? Like, do you help select who they can sell to or anything like? Because otherwise I just sell it to my best friend and then.
Right. And you can suggest a friend who's eligible. So
Yeah.
that's nice.
But the same stipulations with it. Okay, all right. So I'm like, well, I'll just pass it to Justin and he'll sell it for 370.
Yeah, they have to talk to Ashley.
Same.
And they have to show income verification.
Gotcha.
Right? So at the time of purchase, they have to be eligible and under 80% AMI. And that HUD is black and white on, and there's no in between.
I got confused, Nick. So when it's 300, right? Is it on the market?
What did I say? I said it was 200 initially, right? And then let's say appreciates 100,000. So now it's 300 on the market. The appreciation was 100,000 over the time that the first buyer lived there. So they get 25,000 of that. So now we sell it for their 150. We start the resale price at their price. 150 plus we add 25,000 or 25% of the market value. So they're getting, I mean, let's honestly compare this to renting because they don't have another option to buy. So that's,
I'm not arguing.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I would have thought, I love this conversation and you all are very knowledgeable. And then it seems like there's a lot of cross talking too that makes sense because there's a lot of great information and expertise. We're at 10:30 and I would like for us to get through this presentation and then get to the Q&A if you didn't mind that. I love the interaction. I just want to make sure you get everything out that you want us to know.
okay, thank you. Well, and I will, maybe, or will, I don't mind the interaction. That's probably mostly what we're trying to get to. But thank you for keeping us on track.
Get at the clock.
Yeah, no, and so how much, 10:30, how much time do I have?
About 10-15.
10-15 minutes, perfect. No, we'll get through. So yeah, you guys understand the formula. They get 25% of market appreciation, which they really probably wouldn't be able to get into another house to get anything. So that's on top of, also, we start the price at their initial sale price. So what have they also got?
The equity.
That they pay off.
Yeah.
So these are the two equities we try to explain to people, right? There's this two equities that we all get when we buy a house. It's what we pay off, the blood, sweat, and tears of every payment, and the market appreciation if we take care of it. So they get a percentage of the market appreciation, but they get 100%. So if they make extra payments and pay off half their loan, that's all on that. To them, that stays with them. So I like it that there is some accountability of it's not just because to me, the market appreciation part is kind of luck of the draw, isn't it? That you buy the right house in the right location in the right time. And that's the part that in the community that is weirdly upside down in what people make and what housing costs. It doesn't seem fair. But I love that if you pay off your loan, you get every dollar of that appreciation or, equity building. So again, the long-term ground lease is more month to month. There's not a single thing they can't do except rent it out to somebody else. Okay, now they can rent a room out. So again, there's lots of ways that they can make sure they can make their mortgage payment, but they have to live there. They can't move out because they won the lottery and then use it as a rental income.
Right.
That subsidy is then going to their landlord income. So that we don't allow.
So have you had anybody win the lottery?
No.
One person to get their inheritance and was
Oh.
they're like, okay, I can sell back to the pro. And she was so excited to give it to somebody else or, I've actually found that there hasn't been any pushback from buyers. They understand this. It's really interesting.
It's champions.
Yeah. So yeah, not much you can do to the land. The only thing we always give them example, don't dump hazardous waste, and that's illegal for all.
But you would
of us,
do for
right?
your mortgage, right?
Yeah.
It's illegal to.
It's pretty much exactly the rules. If anyone signed a mortgage, they're like, if you don't pay, you can't stay and you can't dump hazardous waste.
Fair.
Yeah,
It's a little-
it's simple. It's a little more than that, but that's
Yeah.
the summary. So again, we talked about saving them $500 a month in just that reduction in sales price. But also that often means new construction, like Ashley spoke about. So most of our 114 houses that we've built over the last 20 years are energy efficient. All of the 11 I built this year all have solar panels. So they're paying about $500 to $600 a year in energy costs.
What?
Yeah. with
I know,
no gas.
I'm so jealous.
With no gas?
No gas. So they get an electric bill and on average, the higher end is $58 a month for electricity and no gas.
And again, we say this because they don't get to sell that onto the market. So that's going to stay for the next buyer and right? You can justify building a little higher quality and more energy efficiency because that is going to create affordability. I mean, God, in the last few years, who is not happy with their energy rates going up? And our folks understand that increase in utility bill can make be life-changing that you can't stay in your house. And then just newer built, right? Because I don't know how many, have you seen people like that? Well, we're gonna get into this. It needs a little work, but we're gonna put in some sweat equity. And you're like, oh, that's $100,000 of sweat equity that you don't have. So there is a reality of like, I don't want to set people up to fail in houses that are affordable by deferment, deferred maintenance, not affordable brand new. We also pay closing costs. We also pay closing costs and then they get prime rate with our lenders. So we do say, now our lenders get to choose the credit terms, but they're really much like anybody that can get a good loan that isn't, you know, a high interest loan. And then anyone who's struggling with credit score, we work with them and get them into a house eventually. So there's some people we've worked with for 2 or 3 years. And a lot of times we'll get them into one of our rental units so that then when they're ready, there's no issue of, you know, late fees and all the stuff we talked about earlier. So I love that, moving people from tenants to homeowners. Now, a lot of our tenants, that might not be what they want to do or, you know, applicable, but we definitely have people that are able to do that. And I love that, getting them out of rental subsidy forever, you know? So the other, we talked about representation on the board. We work with the county every year because they pay taxes on their resale price, not market value, which is fair. We went to BOTA, the Board of Tax Appeals of the state, for several years, 10 years ago, and fought this, but we don't want them to be exempt. You know, our rental housing for low income is exempt, which is a good Kansas statute. That makes it possible for us to have rents that are affordable to them. But our homeowners are at a different level. And in my mind, should pay, they use the schools and the streets and everything else that property taxes go to. But they shouldn't pay on the subsidy that they can't take with them, right?
So they pay on the 25% of appreciation and the sale. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so we're getting, so I've thought about presenting a check to the city, how many houses we've built and what property taxes that has brought in, because every new house actually adds that, right?
Right.
So it's a huge number. We also just work with them. If someone like gets, oh, my favorite is people that buy in the fall and then they don't hear that you're gonna get a tax bill, but your escrow is gonna pay, your lender is gonna pay it. That first bill you get freaks you out, doesn't it? It freaks us all out, and it's okay. And we even try to remind them, but you know, there's so much going on. And it's always right on the end of November, right before the holidays, and you get this bill and it says you owe $2,500 in taxes. And you freak out. And it just is gonna happen. And they call Ashley and Ashley gets the fun job of telling them the lender, or you know, the lender will pay it. It's in escrow. It'll be okay. You'll have Christmas. So just having a support system. If they don't ever have any questions, no problem. But most of my homeowners are first-time buyers, a lot of single moms, and a lot of times feel kind of like, oh, calling a maintenance guy out, feel uncomfortable, you know, just, I don't know enough to feel like I know what I'm doing here. And so they have us to check in on anything. We'll actually send our general contractor out to take a look at things that sound kind of weird. Or we say, if you get a bill from a contractor that looks a little high, or just check with us no matter what before you pay anything. We definitely have gotten some people that got like roof estimates that were 3 times what they should be. And we were able to send them to the right person. So again, that kind of support, which you can't put a dollar figure on, but I really think it keeps people housed. And then when we resell, so they give us notice that they're ready to resell, they don't have to get a realtor or pay commission out of their equity.
Nice.
We're gonna find someone. So part of that is because we need,
Free?
yeah. Not free. We add a commission, a 2%, which is pretty low for these prices, onto the seller's price. So as a new seller, but your resale formula with the 75% going back into the subsidy, it's so reasonable that can be added. So that pays for our time.
Makes sense.
But no, there's no profit on that. We'd probably still lose a little. So we've had no foreclosures.
Thanks.
Ever. So the lenders, once they're on board, I'm like, you guys are silly if you don't want to lend to this because there's no foreclosures and we do all the hard. I mean, we've had 2 or 3 people.
Success.
We've had, well, I think most
Well,
of
I
them
think
are
you're helping.
amazing. But yeah, if I've had a girl, this is my favorite story. She got sick and I mean, it's a horrible story. I shouldn't say that, but like the way you want community to be and what home ownership to be. She got sick, missed a bunch of work, then got fired, and the same time got a notice from her ex that he was challenging her for custody. So this was a single mom that had had her son since 0 to 8. And her life was just falling apart, right? In ways that, none of us can prevent. And so I said, where do you, I've been, I've owed money on my mortgage for the last 3 months. So we have a come to Jesus moment where we're, okay, what do you need to do? This doesn't seem to be sustainable for you. And she said, no, it's not. And really that conversation, usually we have to kind of force to that, right? Because no one wants to admit it's hard, but we're there to have those conversations and say, let's get you out before you lose everything and are foreclosed on, right? So we found a buyer for her. We did some of the rehab work because she didn't have enough in her maintenance account to cover it. So we took it out of proceeds because she had it in proceeds. So that, because normally you can't sell a house maybe like that. So it helps someone in that situation. She was able to go to her tribe in Oklahoma and live free for a while, and take the $8,000 of equity she built to start again. And to me, that's a success, even though she didn't go to buy a new house.
Right.
Losing that $8,000 and being destitute, that's still a win, not being destitute. So we've had 4 or 5 situations like that where it takes a little case management, but also then that house doesn't go to foreclosure and sit there for a year. Who hates the foreclosure system? I do. Watching it like disintegrate while we desperately need this house on the market, drives me crazy. So anyway, we can kind of step in and make that work. So again, here's the other thing I want you to take from this as far as policy. Those 114 homes, the initial subsidy of all of those was around 5 million, 5.3 million, about 47,000 average a home. Now we know they're 80 to 100,000, but they were 20,000 in the early good old days. I miss those days. But right now, if we looked at the resale formula price, let's say everyone tells us they're going to sell. Let's give Ashley a heart attack. This year, everyone's going to call and say, I'm ready to sell. The difference between what they would sell it for and the market value would be over 15 million. So that 75% of market appreciation is just being locked into that house to make it more affordable over time. Now, when do we get federal money and make it grow? Right? That's what I just love about this idea. And the homeowners are absolutely accountable, but there's a safety net to get them in and get them where they need to be. And so many of ours are perfectly amazing homeowners, but I don't see any issues of when the neighbors, when I build new ones, say, oh God, they're gonna keep all their trash out. I mean, just the stigma of affordable housing. I actually have a presentation with pictures of all my homes, like about 80 of them and I run it while they say it. And I say, show me what you're talking about. There's never been an example of it. We have one that maybe is a little more cluttery than others, but honestly, homeowners are so proud and it's better than my house. No one drive by that, okay? My husband's a general contractor and he's a hoarder of tools, so. So here's example 2, as we talk about more density, Harper was our most recent example. And trust fund money went into Harper. So I want to show these are so cute. Look at Melissa there. She is very excited about her first ever house. And
Those are cute.
they're so cute and so fun. And all the owners over there are also, I just love building community. You know, you want to put a roof over someone's head, but when Ashley gets a call from one of the young millennials in one of our houses on Beatnik that says, I haven't seen my senior neighbor for a week. Can you check on her?
Yeah, that really happened. And it turned out that our neighbor was in the hospital for the last week. So I was able to get a hold of her family and make sure there weren't any extra things that we needed to try to do to help her with that housing situation. But how beautiful that this millennial did that.
And we're really seeing that. So again, that's my another plug for density in the new development code is new kind of neighborhoods. Really, I think we lost some of that extended family in your neighborhood. You know, it's not for everyone, but I think it's a really good thing for folks. Beatnik down below, those are across houses that sold for 350 to 400,000 across the street. So when neighborhoods say you're going to ruin my property value, and I get it, if that's your nest egg and you're a senior and you're counting on all that, I totally get it. It just doesn't happen. So again, I hate for people to worry about something that isn't factual. We've never seen it in Lawrence, and this is such a good example of these little houses, which I sold those for 130 to 160. Little 2-bedroom, solar panel, heat and cool at 500 a year across the street, and it didn't affect what they could sell across the
You
street.
can match the aesthetic of those houses. And so that idea of you're going to come in and build these like affordable housing that's not going to match the aesthetic is completely untrue.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Oh, my boy, I just have to always show a picture when they were little and cute. They're grumpy teenagers now and it sucks. You know that feeling? So I'm just pretending they're still sweet. But but what questions do you guys have?
I've got one more.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I saw some, I'd never heard of the term silent deferred mortgage before, and I saw it on there. Is that so? Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
So that's traditionally the way a lot of home buyer programs for lower income people were created. So that HOOP program, that original program we did where we put 278 Laurentians in their first house that were under income. That's how we did it. We gave them money to finance the market value. But what we argue with the CLT is that we're actually making it affordable instead of giving people financing tools to support the market. And then, you know, creating those financing tools to kind of be locked in the community. Because the other problem with the deferred mortgage, that was what Brad was talking about. Remember that we're going to get some of that back? That was in a deferred mortgage. So the HOOT loans were often way back in the good old days. It was $100,000 house and they could finance 80 and we put 20% down. So they would get out of private mortgage insurance too. See, our subsidy gets everybody out of that 150 a month too. That's really, really good deal. So that was how they would do that. And then maybe some of that would have to be paid back when you sold on the market. But you're assuming you sold enough to pay that back. Instead of doing that and getting it back, we just lock it in and don't liquidate it.
Okay, thanks.
I have a very fast question. Around your funding mechanisms for new development. So I know a lot of CLTs, especially new ones around the country, are struggling a lot to fund to be able to start this type of project. What are your outside, I heard you say federal dollars, but do you have a consistent funding stream or are you kind of anywhere you can?
Anywhere and everywhere. It has been a challenge. One of the things we've done in the last 3 years is gone from building big 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses on one lot to smaller things like the Harper development. So unfortunately, with interest rates going up and building and material costs up 40%, it's really just allowed us to continue at the same prices where a lot of people, they can't build within that. But money, yeah, we get but usually that's for lower income, so that's a lot of rental.
Okay, so more rental for state, but there's no state. This is.
There
not a
is federal,
question.
yeah, there's federal state funding that they get the same home funds that we get. And
Right.
we've been able to get some of that
Okay.
to Lawrence.
Okay,
But they like to spread it around the state, and so it is very limited.
okay.
And just like our own home allocation, I mean, it keeps going down. So these two do amazing work to make sure we get that. And that has been my consistent source. The reason we've been able to build this trust over the last 15 years is because every year we've been able to count on 150,000. And back in the day, that could put in 3 new houses, and we've just built. But I'm so grateful that we locked it in, because now we can look at that 5 million has gone to 15 million in subsidy. So I suggest, even though it feels harder and harder to do, we still know that locking it in, even if we can only do 1 house a year, it's creating this, it's permanently affordable. And then Leah, I did want to touch on, so again, we're a membership organization, and that if, let's say the city wanted to do an RFP on land, they just wanted to make it a permanently affordable project, we could take the land, we as in the Lawrence Community Land Trust, because there's no reason for the city to create another organization to be a nonprofit to do this, right? So the efficiency there, but that it's not tenants to homeowners, it's the land trust, and it would have an agreement with the city of there's going to be an RFP and other people can bid on it. And it doesn't have to be our development project. We are a lot of community land trusts across the country. Some of them don't build anything.
Right.
They work with their habitat in town. And we've done that with our habitat. And we're trying to do more of that. But that we're almost the steward person of the asset, the land asset in the community that either creates affordable housing or a daycare center or whatever project that we want. And that as long as we, figure out a fee structure that just pays for our costs in holding that land and stewarding that land, we don't need to make anything else on that. We want to be that community organization that, so again, the city has been trying to, instead of creating their own community land trust, which seems kind of weird. I mean, seems in our size a community, but I get it. Everyone thinks of community land trust as tenants to homeowners, and they don't want city land to just go to us. And I don't either, because I can't do anymore. I've got a pipeline of 500 units right now. So trust me, I want more units to be developed with all of the partners.
Yeah.
So whatever way we can be a part of that, in just bringing our knowledge of stewardship of affordable projects, I am all for that. And I love partnerships. Since COVID, I'm never going back to no partnership. I mean, Monty, the endowment does some projects with us in partnership. And it's a great example of just thinking outside the box is probably the only way we're going to get to funding things.
CLTs are the way to get people.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. I encourage questions to continue, and it looks like you have all the answers for the questions that may come about. Thank you for your time and your presentation today. And if there are additional questions, please hit up Rebecca and the beautiful picture you have of your kids. I love that. You captured a moment of innocence.
Back then, what happened? They're 12 and 14 now.
Yeah,
I know they'll come back to me, right? They'll come back.
Thank you again. And
That's 15.
we will encourage more communication with you throughout our continued discussions. So
Thank you so much for all of you for listening. And yeah, if you have a burning question at any time, just email me, no problem. Because I need you guys to let the community know, understand. It is complicated, but once you kind of, that makes sense.
Mhm.
We're locking money in, and now we have plenty to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for your work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, boy.
Before we move on, can I just make one comment very briefly? So just the motivation or the outcome that I was intending on for this presentation is one, so the board could get a better understanding of the community land trust model, what we mean by permanent affordability and a mechanism for how we could put more units into permanent affordability, but also to give an indication, as Rebecca alluded to at the end, that if we do consider like an RFP model for the trust funds instead of a NOFO, if the board wants to get more like directive in the kind of projects we want to see, this is a partnership we could work with where we're putting land in trust or requiring the land to be in trust and finding different builders for it. So just to put it out there for the board to consider.
No vote?
Sorry, the notice of
Funding
funding opportunity, yeah.
Thanks.
I'm going to hopefully get us to start talking about this next agenda, and then this is also an action to approve, but our next discussion topic includes discussion on coming to a decision for our 2025 Affordable Housing Board meeting schedule. So we have proposed a meeting schedule for 2025. This is a draft. I hope that all were able to look over and consider and also look at your calendars to see if they complement. But we'd like to propose this as our 2025 schedule with the opportunity to talk more in depth about some of the policy recommendations, some of the discussions that we heard from our presenters today in the interim of these months. So please take a look at this calendar, see about this calendar being suitable, and let's have a discussion about whether or not this is a doable calendar for us. And then talk a little bit, I know we have a few minutes, but talk a little bit about what those advisory boards, what the discussions that could be happening in between those months where we're still integrated in a discussion, but moving in a work group to continue those discussions outside of our large group meetings. So I'll stop talking and let us look at the proposed meeting schedule and have some discussion on that and then confirm it if we're able to today.
So just to give some context to the schedule, this is based on the sort of action items that would be required based on our current NOFO timeline that we've been using. Dates that we would need to meet as a whole board. And as Christina indicated, the expectation would be that we form at least 2 working groups around the areas that the AHAB are assigned under the A Place for Everyone plan, and that those working groups would meet in the off months or perhaps even during the full board meetings. So the other work would be continuing, but these are the dates of the full board meetings.
And then a little bit of more discussion, and I won't take up too much because I do appreciate discussion in this group. But the 2 work groups that we're talking about considering are in alignment with the Place for Everson policy and what the city of Lawrence is considering to move us into a space of real action centered. But the work groups to consider are making recommendations. I don't have the formal names of these groups, but I'll talk about a little bit what they do. One of the work groups look to make recommendations to maybe earmark or expedite trust funds or request proposals for NOFO. So one of the work groups looks to be looking at diversifying sources of funding for the AHAB to consider. And the other work group looks to focus upon
Revenue.
grant subsidies and our current RFP model. I wrote that down in my notes, but could you expand upon those work groups?
Yeah, so one of the working groups would be focused on identifying and proposing additional revenue streams to feed into the trust funds. Right now, our only revenue source is the 0.05 sales tax. Other communities do diversify their funding, and we have, there are lots of options. So that would be one working group. The other one would be exploring opportunities for the NOFO if we want to keep it as a NOFO, if we want to explore an RFP, and then in either direction, fine tuning what we are looking for prioritizing for the 2026 round of trust funds.
So something else I heard today was the need to potentially discuss in more depth some of the policy solutions that we heard about. So when I heard that, I thought maybe that would be a work group. Is there a different idea for how those discussions would happen, or?
So if I could make a recommendation that we maybe do a study session for that, because there are already work groups within A Place for Everyone that are looking into those. So I think in addition to these 2 work groups, if there is of interest for anybody in this board to join additional work groups in the Place for Everyone plan, there is one for restorative housing, There is one for accessibility and affordable housing, and then there is a tenant right to representation. So I would recommend one of our meetings be maybe a deep dive into that tenant survey and the policy recommendations, and then if it feels good to move forward with the work group and anybody, but I think it's up to.
That's kind of what happened with source of income. We talked about that here, but then it got handed off to human resources or whatever that committee is. We weren't really the experts in the field, if you will, but it required partly our support.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
And I think what could happen is we could make policy recommendations through this board. If that, I mean, we could take that study session and just make policy recommendations if we find something at the end of that. Or we can have somebody sit in those work groups that would bring it back to this board to report on.
So the study session would be in addition to the meeting scheduled there, correct?
If it- One of those
could be.
meetings, yeah.
Good.
We're just trying to envision how we'd, like, looking at the agenda items, like making sure we had enough time to do the study session. Or I was concerned that if we just tried to make it a part of one of those meetings, since we're not meeting every month under this, that we might not have sufficient time. So.
So I apologize for interjecting. It's 11 o'clock, so we either need to extend the meeting or adjourn and pick this up.
I move that we extend the meeting for 10 minutes.
A second.
I'll take a vote. Is anyone opposed to extending the meeting 10 minutes? Okay, and we will go ahead and extend to 11:10.
Okay.
So sorry, so
We
for
need
the
a-
next meeting, so if the AHAB is interested in adopting this meeting schedule, I would suggest that would be the
6 to 8 p.m.
that would be the first action, that we just didn't make a decision on this set schedule. And then in terms of a study session, that can be a follow-up decision, whether like the February meeting needs to be extended for an hour, whether the board wants to have an additional meeting, but that we just get the regular meetings set.
We need a motion to adopt this. Is that what we're looking
We're
for?
looking for an action to
I
adopt.
would move to adopt the Affordable Housing Advisory Board 2025 meeting schedule as drafted
Second.
All meetings are at 6 p.m.
in the evening.
We're working at 9 now. Okay.
Second the motion.
We have the motions first and seconded. I will just
I would call for discussion.
call for discussion.
Is it a generally true statement that they're trying to move most of these board meetings to the evening for public participation?
Yeah, we are the outlier. We are currently the only
That's what I
board that meets, yeah. No, okay.
We talked about that a year ago, or 2 years ago.
Are they all Thursdays?
Yes.
You know, so I'm gonna have to be a little bit more proactive than usual on Valentine's Day this year.
Right?
No last
No
minute.
going to Hy-Vee on.
Your
Don't have that either.
All right.
Or we can collectively come up with something in this room. on
Mhm.
Yeah,
February.
we've got work to do, but who's taking reservation?
I also think in alignment with how our public comment is now structured, we want to make sure that this is a conversation our county and community are real invigorated, really engaged in having. Opening up to 6 to 8 p.m. leaves a little bit more of a time for public comment and people to interact, so much so as they do with city commission. I know that this meeting schedule is a little bit difficult if you have a family. Especially if you have a family who you're running across town to do and make appointments and schedules, but I think we took a consideration of this meeting time being a good source of time for our community and for each other. Hopefully it's for us as well. So that the meeting time is also kind of conducive to how we want to interact with our public as well. This gives a good time for people to reach us.
So we have a motion and a second.
And we were just doing a discussion, I think.
Okay.
Need a vote?
If we are needing, or if we were finished with the discussion, I feel like we're ready to move on to a vote. Okay, I'll go through the members. And so we are finalizing our Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting schedule. And all in favor, I'll call it by name. If you agree, Mark Bueller. Thank you, Andrew Gallagher.
Aye.
Mary Alfiero.
Aye.
I say aye. Christina Gentry. Elizabeth O'Neill.
Aye.
Monty Sokup.
Aye.
Okay, we have a motion and we have all approved. And thank you for that discussion. Going further into the proposed meeting schedule, was a conversation about committing to a additional meeting. I feel like that additional meeting or that work group meeting or that meeting that you were mentioning. Study session, Mariel, is that something we want to propose in our February conversation, or do we feel like we could maybe talk about that today? I feel like the reason I'm bringing that up is because we're talking about identifying 2 work groups, but there are so many other work groups within the Place for Everyone that maybe others in this space would find agreeable to their schedule and wanting to contribute to. So maybe that session meeting could be what we talk about now as we place into the agenda.
Because our agendas are, I'm sorry if I can speak. Because it looks like our agendas are a little packed, but we do have discussion for work group on February 13th. So I wonder if we can discuss and finalize work groups then. And if we agree that the tenant experiencing survey requires an additional work study session, we schedule that then. Or move to put it into a future meeting. I do think it's a unique opportunity for us to talk about policy recommendations within this body because the other 3 groups are very separate in what their focuses are. So us joining those meetings would be more to like deepen that work and within whatever policy recommendations. So that might even lead us to, okay, maybe we need someone to sit in the tenant right to counsel work group. It's already somebody, but
Right.
you know, we already got a couple people, but that might lead to maybe what we want to do with the policy recommendations. So that would be my advice would be February, discuss it, move forward on the groups, and then decide if we want a study session on the tenant experiencing survey.
It looks like we have packed agenda. We'll include that discussion into the February meeting. Okay, thank you all. I feel like we have made it a great opportunity for our city and for our community to our conversations. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move along to the quick updates. And I'll also, because there's, information I do not know about the updates, including the Affordable Housing Advisory Board member update, I'll defer to Yulia for any updates that you may be able to provide.
Sure. Well, we actually made the update about the member at the beginning of the meeting. So Dr. Han did decide to resign and a new member was appointed by the board. I'm also incredibly disappointed that Dr. Han was perhaps forced to resign or, that I think it's, Anyway, unfortunately, that was her decision in order to stay safe and healthy. A new member was appointed who obviously wasn't here today. He will be officially onboarded by the city and fully join us at our February meeting. In terms of the update on the trust fund awards, the city commission did approve the AHAB's recommendations for 2025 trust funds awards unanimously on consent on Tuesday. So we now are moving forward with drafting those agreements and the recipients will be receiving those to receive funding in the new year.
Thank you, Leah. Moving on to public comment, in anticipation that there may be some online or maybe in space, we want to really make sure that we give enough and plenty time for public comment. So I do apologize if there is anyone online who's waiting to, but we have moved and structured our public comment to the end of the meeting now. So I would, with the 2 minutes that we have, open the opportunity for public comment. Is there any online?
Is nobody?
Okay, great. Seeing that there is none online and no person who wants to give public comment in space, I move that we move to adjourn this meeting for today. Okay, Y'all next year. Thank you.
Thank you.